You're an expert. You certainly sound like when you're speaking here at DEF CON, you deal a lot with social engineering and intelligence and things like that. Are we doomed?
Yeah.
Come on. You're supposed to give us hope. You're supposed to say, no, it's okay. All right, everybody, it is day one of DEF CON, and I am here checking out some of the various workshops and whatnot, but going through the book they have with all these talks, I came across a very interesting one about fake news. And so I am sitting here with Mike Schrenk, who is a standby speaker here at DEF CON, and you've got a really interesting talk about fake news. But I'm going to throw it to you to introduce yourself and let us know who you are, what you do, and why you're passionate about this subject.
Sure. My name is Mike Schrenk. This is the 8th time I'll be speaking at DEF CON. I've been going to DEF CON since DEFCON I. At that time, I sold an article to Computer World magazine, so I was basically a journalist during that one. But my interest in this whole area of the news comes from the fact that I've been in the hacking community since, I would say probably since 95, 97. And after my first book came out, I got contacted by a journalist in the Netherlands to get me involved in some stuff that was going on over there. And it ended up doing workshops for investigative journalists on some pretty simple hacking kind of techniques.
So you're going to be talking about fake news, right? Is that?
Well, no, not
necessarily.
And I really hate the term fake news because it just rolls off people's tongues way too easily. If we called it what it really is, I think people would refer to it less and maybe take it more seriously. Because what it really is it's mass social engineering. We have been socially engineered to accept certain news as fact when a little bit of research would indicate that it probably isn't.
So, yeah, let's just jump right in. What's the biggest problem you're seeing? What's going on today in this world of, dare I say it, fake news? Well,
to cut it short, if we were going to have a really long discussion, and if I was going to do my talk right now, we would talk about objectives. Why do people do fake news? We would talk about the targets, who's targeted in fake news, and we talk about some of the attack vectors. So you can see just by those three concepts, this is classic social engineering. It's hacking.
It's offensive. It's like an attack.
It is an attack. And the thing that people need to realize is that anytime somebody is social engineered, it's a transaction. It's a willful transaction. So the person who's doing it, the person who sets up the hack, is receiving something. And the person who's being attacked and hacked, even though they're not willingly doing it, they are also receiving something of value in return. And right now what it is, the thing that's driving all of this fake news right now, the thing that the socially engineered target gets in exchange for the social engineering hack, more often than not, is something that's referred to as confirmation bias. In other words, you've got a notion in your head. It may be true, it may be false. I'm not here to judge. But you've got something in your head, and you just read something, you just heard something that confirms something you've believed for a long time. And that is the basis behind socially engineered news. It's the basis behind a lot of things. Now, not all of this type of engineering is done for political reasons. It's done for all kinds of reasons. There was a case, which I'll be speaking about at my talk, where somebody was running, they've got all these news websites, and they'd run things like, what does, they name some celebrity. What does some celebrity think about the women in Rochester, New York? They pick some little tiny, not tiny, Rochester's not tiny, but they would pick some very focused group, like people who live in Rochester, Toledo, Ohio, Jacksonville, Florida, something like that, but not too big, because you want to keep your group small and focused. And then what they'll do is they'll buy ads, like on Facebook, really narrow down who they're looking for. And if you happen to be from Duluth, Minnesota, and you see, what does Brad Pitt think about the women in Duluth, Minnesota? Well, that's bizarre. I'm from Duluth. You click on that. Well, hundreds of thousands of people click on those kinds of things, right? And there's money to be made in this whole fake news thing, too. So it's not just about political agendas. It's also money being made. There's serious money being made.
That's fascinating, because when we hear about fake news, we tend to hear about the political agendas, right? Manipulating people into voting or things like that. But that's something I never thought about. Targeting a tiny community.
Oh yeah,
because it makes them, curious. It's a way to build up your traffic, make money.
Absolutely. Now, sometimes those two paths cross too. In my talk, I'll talk about there's a person who has. I'm not going to name the name of his company, so I'm going to misquote it. But in my talk, I actually give you the name of his company. He put an ad. He promoted an article in Colorado where he was saying that, news report, people are using food stamps to buy marijuana at dispensaries in Colorado. Tons of activity. I mean, people were reading this thing, they were commenting about it. It got a lot of buzz because it resonated with a lot of people. It's like, well, people shouldn't be doing that. Well, of course they shouldn't. But if you research that at all, you would know that I think across the country, because of some federal banking laws, all dispensaries are cash only. There is no possible way you could use food stamps to buy anything at a dispensary. But that didn't stop a congressperson, a state assembly person from Colorado, to propose a bill. It got on the floor. They actually voted on it to prevent food stamp recipients from using their food stamps to buy marijuana in Colorado. It actually got a vote. So, I mean, this stuff has some it resonates.
Did they ban food stamps from being used?
They did that when they opened the first dispensary. You can't do it. I mean, it's never been possible.
That's scary.
But the thing is, getting back to that confirmation bias, there's people who that kind of a story really resonates with because, again, someone's getting away with something, and it just resonates, even though it's a total fabricated story, total impossible story. A little bit of research would have cleared that up.
So the company that does things like that kind of fake news, actual just BS stories, are these just small blogs run by a few people that with their whole intention being fake news, or do we see the same thing, at least in your opinion, from bigger news outlets?
I was going to do a little lab where I was actually going to write my own fake stories and do metrics and stuff and run analytics and talk about, what kind of stories did what. And I discovered that there's just so many case studies available that you can do that I didn't have to do anything that nefarious. Some of the companies are single-person companies. Some of the ones that I talk about are just part-time jobs for people that generate a lot of traffic. I've got one case that I talk about where the guy hires, I think he's got 25 to 30 part-time writers on his staff, and they're kept pretty busy.
Wow.
He says he makes around $300,000 a year doing this. So, I mean, there's reasonable money to be made in the fake news. You were asking, again, the size of the organizations that do this.
Yeah.
Like I said, it ranges from one-person shops to state-sponsored activity.
I think right now, the main reason I don't like saying fake news, but it's kind of the word, it's kind of the phrase, is that, one side of the aisle is going to say fake news is the mainstream media. They've gotten us into wars. Right. They lied about Iraq. We have seen some, I'll flat out say it, I've called out some Washington Post journalists for writing fake stories. Just
oh yeah.
Deliberate.
America's got a history of fake news. The one that I certainly studied when I was in school was what led up to the Spanish-American War with yellow journalism and Hearst and Pulitzer battling for subscribers of their newspapers in New York, and they would write very animated and very insightful articles about what was going on in Cuba at the time. A little background. In around 1890s, there was civil unrest in Cuba. At the time, it was a Spanish-held colony, and there were a lot of work disputes, that kind of stuff. The United States came in, tried to mitigate what was going on, trying to prevent war, but there's a lot of unrest. The United States sent a warship into the Bay of Havana to try to keep peace. And all the while, Hearst and Pulitzer are writing these really inflammatory stories about what's going on. We got to do something about this. So, fever pitch was rising, right? One morning, the ship that was anchored in Havana blew up. Boom, blew up. Of course, this had to be the Spanish that blew this ship up. I mean, that's what both papers were saying. The reality is that we don't know what happened. Historians think it was probably an accident. Something happened, but pretty much by this point there was so much public interest in having war against Spain that it pretty much made it easy for the politicians to declare war on Spain, and it was a pretty short war.
So this is Hearst and Pulitzer.
Yeah, ironic, isn't it?
Are you saying that they were putting out fake news?
Oh yeah.
But Pulitzer, that's the award for great journalism.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know.
Are we doomed?
A little irony.
Yeah. Man.
But when you hear the term yellow journalism, that's what that refers to.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a history of that happening. And again, it was happening for economic reasons.
Yeah.
And, in our society with our First Amendment, you got the freedom of the press. In fact, that is the only profession that has constitutional protection is journalism. The rest of them don't. But along with that, you also have the right to do satire and parody, and you can write the most inflammatory thing you want, and you can be sued, and you can go to court and say, it was just a story. I can write fiction just like anybody else can.
I think there was something that happened, correct me if I'm wrong, where a Fox outlet said that they were entertainment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
Entertainment, satire.
So you do counterintelligence. How would you describe your?
It's interesting. I do counterintelligence, but I've done it for corporate clients. I've never done it in terms of the news media. I'm not sure how that would be applied, but there might be something there. I don't know.
But you're a social engineering expert, I'd say, right? That's fair to say. Mm-hmm. Counterintelligence. Knowing what you know, do you trust the mainstream media?
I don't trust any news that comes from a domain that's fresher than 2 or 3 months. If I don't recognize the source, I'm more apt to research the fundamentals of the story. If I see a story from a well-established journalism outlet, I am less apt to do that, but I still do it. Yeah. I definitely do it. But this whole confirmation bias thing it's huge. And just because I'm talking about it, I don't want to make it sound like this is somebody else's issue. We all do it. I do it. We all do it. And it doesn't just apply to the news either. I mean, someday I would like to write a book on social engineering on a really broad scale, where it gets into PR, marketing, politics, even things like racism. I think racism is largely a socially engineered concept, because nobody's born racist.
Yeah.
And the same tools that people use to social engineer other things are used to basically groom racists. Religion is another one.
Yeah. I was having this conversation earlier.
Of course, not your religion, but everybody else's.
Right. I was talking to someone about this, and I said, you know what? It's so much falls under the umbrella of social engineering.
Yeah. So, and people have asked me, it's like, well, and I give examples of socially engineered political kind of stuff. And people say, well, isn't this what other politicians do? And I said, yeah, a lot of this is just really good communication. There's a really gray line between a really good, strong communicator that can really know how to manipulate people's emotions to get them to go up and down and inject your concepts, and pretty soon everybody loves what you're talking about. One of the best speakers I've ever seen, Steve Jobs, master at this kind of thing. Another speaker that I hold up there, Dalai Lama, he does the same thing. It's a lot of it is just really good communication. The difference is Steve Jobs and the Dalai Lama are talking about real stuff, as opposed to making up something about buying marijuana with food stamps, which is just total fabrication.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe the big story here is if you're a good communicator, you can sell anything,
Yep. I mean,
and it's all social engineering. A good book that just captivates you, that really reaches you at the core, you're being socially engineered. It may not be nefarious, But that's just good communication. Because the author knows which buttons to push, where your soft points are, and that's where they focus, right?
So it's kind of for the people who are watching. I don't know. I'll do a quick recap. But white, gray, and black hat. White hats are the good guys, gray hats are in the between, and the black hats are the bad guys.
Right.
It sounds like what we have is white hat communication, which is good journalism.
Black hat journalism.
I've called it that before because I tell people, like, I'm a hacker first, journalist second.
Right.
This is where I come from, and I look at a lot of the fake news. It's just black hat journalism. It's manipulating people for personal gain or some kind of self-interest instead of the greater good.
Right.
I mean, do you think so?
Yeah.
Okay, so not to go too long, but I guess I'll have one final thought for you. You're an expert. You certainly sound like when you're speaking here at DEF CON, you deal a lot with social engineering and intelligence and things like that. Are we doomed?
Yeah.
Come on. You're supposed to give us hope. You're supposed to say, no, it's okay. We're doomed.
The last time I gave this talk, somebody stood up and said, so what's the future look like?
It looks like shit.
Saying, well, we're screwed. I mean, the only way out of this is education. People like Facebook has attempted to screen things, and Google's working with their SEO kind of stuff. The real issue here is that there's money to be made, and just because Google or Facebook are tweaking their ad network, there are so many ad networks you can use.
Yep.
Or you could just use like an Amazon affiliate account or something. I mean, there's so many ways to make money off this stuff. So there's no way you're going to be able to filter the content. I think the number one thing that people need to do is they need to be very aware of the whole confirmation bias issue and realize that we all do it, and as an exercise to try to identify those times where we're buying into confirmation bias. Because I can guarantee you we all do it many times every day. And that is the real key. That's something that they need to teach in elementary school. It's really easy to get suckered into something if somebody compliments you.
Yeah.
Don't fall for the compliments. Don't fall for the things that stroke you the right way. Be a little more objective, and I mean that's the real message. That's the real message.
Rad. Well, Mike, thanks so much for meeting. This is a fantastic conversation. For those that are watching, really fascinating conversation. I've talked about fake news and media a lot, and it's something I'm really passionate about. So this was great. So I really do appreciate it. Let me know what you think. Comment below. Send me your thoughts. We'll keep the conversation going. If you like the video, click the like button. You can find me on Twitter at Timcast, Timcast, Instagram as well. And if you want to support the work that I do, you can go to patreon.com/Timcast. Give whatever you'd like. Give nothing at all. My videos will always be free and available. And you can also go to minds.com/Timcast and subscribe for an exclusive feed behind the scenes when available. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow at 4 p.m.